Thank you, and good afternoon. So, forged from the future. Well, a few people have actually come up to me here and said, Peter, what does forged actually mean? So to put you out of your misery, forged is what the blacksmith does when they heat the metal in the fire and then they hammer it into shape. So I guess you might say forged from the future in Dutch, gesmeden vanuit de toekomst, something like that. Okay, so there I was, in the doctor's surgery with my then 14-year-old son, who was showing signs of burnout after 2 years in the secondary education system. And the doctor, after hearing the story, he said, oh yeah, I see quite a few of his type come through my surgery. You see, the thing is, he's intelligent and he's sensitive. That's the worst combination for school. And it kind of hit me like a thunderbolt. I was like, there's nothing wrong with my boy. The system is sick. It's not even preparing them for the world that's coming, but it's actually damaging the kids who could make the greatest potential solutions to the problems that we're facing. So to cut a long story short, that's why we now have Agora in Culemborg. Thank you, Chef, and thank you, Hans. And it's also why I'm so passionate about Ubiquity, which is the story I'm going to share with you now. This is my favorite quote from Aristotle. Where your talents meet the needs in the world, therein lies your vocation. And the reason I like this is it's got two pieces to it. The individual with your talents, but also the state of the world. Because there's been a lot of talk about the importance of personalized learning, and absolutely, it's critical. Put the learners at the center. How can they bring their passion and purpose into the world? But if we personalize an education that's completely irrelevant to this world we're coming into, that Jan also sketched, then what use is that? So we need to combine the two of them. And I want to spend a moment on the state of the world, although I don't need to spend long on it. Thank you very much, Jan, because he covered that for us. So here are all these kind of issues now that are escalating, feeding off each other, coming together in a way that we've never experienced before as humanity. And the education system that we currently have was designed when most of these were flatlining, not even starting to scale. So we're dealing with a level of complexity that we've never had to deal with before. And if we doubt the challenge in front of this generation, we just need to read the recent IPCC report on climate change. When we pull our heads out of the sand, it's telling us we need to wake up. We have a moral obligation to prepare this generation for what's coming, because they're the ones who are going to take the hit. And they're the ones who are going to have to face these challenges head on and grasp the opportunities while they can. The kind of change that Jan was talking about is indeed a nonlinear leap. We've been through this before. And the thing about these nonlinear changes is we can't actually see the future we're moving into from the reality we're in right now. And the current system we have is built for an old era. So we really need to be working out how are we going to forge our education system from the future, not from the way we think it should run now. And that's the mission that we embarked on at Ubiquity. So as we looked at how would we reinvent higher education completely for this future that's coming, and we started to do research into the need for higher education in the world, we discovered, to our amazement, OECD and World Bank figures, that there were literally tens of millions of kids a year globally coming out of secondary education, qualified for higher education, but just couldn't get in. So what about we were able to provide a form of education that was accessible and affordable globally, and that really equipped people to deal with these challenges? And here are three of the things that we had to think through. How do we make sure that the content is relevant, that people are taught stuff that's really going on in the world right now, that really helps them deal with these kind of challenges, this transition time? How do we make sure that learning is not just something that happens in the classroom, but that it's recognized throughout all parts of our lives? Because we all know that we learn a lot more actually in action than we do just sitting in the classroom. And finally, how do we make sure that credentials we give people actually have some value? because the degree as a currency right now is losing its value. Employers are saying, well, I don't think I trust this bit of paper anymore. It's not really telling me this person is equipped to deal with the reality that we're facing. So I want to take us through these 3 points in terms of how we've tried to respond to this at Ubiquity. First, we need to obviously engage the whole person. The kind of challenges that we're facing at the moment can't just be solved with the head. So let's take Meno, a Dutch MBA student who's at Ubiquity. He comes in, and 1/3 of his points he gets for knowledge. Only 1/3. With knowledge that's focused on understanding the challenges of the time, bringing critical thinking to all of that. So the next 1/3 that Meno gets his points for is self-mastery, is personal development. Because we know that the quality of impact you make in the world is directly related to how you show up as a person, not necessarily how much you simply know. So Meno might get mindfulness training, there's potential body work, there's work on relationships, all of these kind of things that help us show up with integrity and authenticity in the world. And then the other 1/3 of his points he gets through his impact project. This is a project that he designs that could be starting up his own social enterprise, it could be working on a community project, it could be working on a change project in the organization. All these 3 areas happen in parallel. And the reason that's important is because when you step out into the world to try to do change, you bump up against yourself and you start to realize what it is you need to learn to be able to make a positive difference. So engage the whole person. 2, so Meno comes in. He does look a bit like this, but he's a bit more handsome than that. And he gets a few core courses, but then he can basically pick the courses that he wants to suit his own pathway. So he came to me a couple of months ago, and he said, Professor Peter, I just took your transformational leadership course. It's fantastic. I want my MBA to be in future-proof leadership. And I said, sure, Meno, that's fantastic. You tell me which courses you want to bundle together to create your MBA in future-proof leadership, and you can have it, as long as you publish it so that other students can get inspired by the same thing. So that's what he's doing right now. The kind of content that we communicate to people. On the one hand, you've got employers saying, from the IBM studies, CEO studies, we're in a reality of hypercomplexity. We need these kind of qualities from people, and we're not getting them from our business schools, what we might call the soft skills. At the same time, we've got these major challenges that we're facing in the world, that the UN has done a fantastic job mapping these out with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and UNESCO has produced a competence framework that lays out what do you need to learn, what do you need to develop to be able to deal with any of these challenges or any of these single Sustainable Development Goals. So our learning content is geared to provide people with these qualities and to be able to engage with these kind of issues. The most recent example that we have of this is working out in Asia. So as a prototype in Sri Lanka, the story that we're getting out of Asia is there's been all this tech education, but the employers are saying, we need the soft skills now. We need people who can communicate, who can collaborate, who have the human aspects, because we'll teach them the tech stuff. It's all moving so fast. So Dilani, for example, a 17-year-old student, she comes in, she's doing a tech training, and then she goes into a classroom environment where the teachers are working with Ubiquity's online content. The students have access to the online platform, but they're getting taught through these interactive exercises in the classroom how to develop these kind of competencies. So in this situation, we're working more with a blended environment. And finally, particularly when we're online, as we've seen from the MOOCs, the massive open online courses, retention is a real issue. So for us, there are 2 solutions to that. One is use the technology to the best of the possibilities, use the gamification opportunities that are there. So students, for every single thing they achieve at Ubiquity, they get points. The points continue to stack up. For every competency they develop, they get a badge, a competency-based badge that they can put out on LinkedIn and that employers can look at. That's all great, but ultimately what makes the difference is also the human touch. So when people take a course online, they do it in groups of 8 with a course facilitator who takes them through that journey. When they are working on their self-mastery, they have a self-mastery mentor who works with them their whole time at Ubiquity to guide them on their own personalized personal development pathway. And when they work on their impact project, they have an impact coach who's a lean startup, social enterprise specialist, project management, those kind of things. So combining the best of the technology with the best of high touch and human interaction is absolutely critical to the success of this kind of model. So that's education in the more kind of formal classroom environment. But what's really key also is that we integrate learning and we recognize learning in other parts of our lives. So let's take Federico, a marketing guy who works with ISEC. ISEC, some of you might know, is the biggest student-run organization in the world. Over 40,000 students run this organization in more than 120 countries. They deliver exchanges, intercultural learning, leadership development experiences for students all over the world. And those students, they can stay in ISEC doing this job for between 1 to 7 years. And they all say to me, I learn a lot more at ISEC than I do in the classroom at the university, but they get no recognition for it. So what we've done is found a way using classic prior learning assessment or recognition of prior learning technologies to be able to give those people credits, points, competency-based badges for the competencies that they develop and show on the job when they're working with ISEC. And those badges they can put out and share, create a kind of competency portfolio, which is what employers are asking for now, and they can stack them up. You need to think in terms of stackable credentials that you stack up towards a professional diploma or ultimately potentially towards an MBA with a combination of courses. So how we enable people to get recognition for the learning that they do when they're actually engaged in the world, combined with the classroom learning, that we see as really being the future. And then the last point is, so how do we make sure that they get credentials that are recognized? Because as I said, the degree is losing its currency. Employers want to know, what can they do? We need to know at the moment, given the challenges that we're facing, what are the skills, competencies, qualities that people can have? So we're working with a competency-based badging system that's tied into a database of 54,000 competencies developed by industry sectors all over the world, tied into 330 professions and all the related diplomas. And the industries agree these are the kinds of evidence we need for somebody to be able to say, yes, I've got that competence. So that means when somebody puts their Ubiquity badge on LinkedIn and they click on it, they can click all the way through to the specific evidence that somebody actually produced for that. And that way, these credentials, these micro-credentials actually have real value to employers, to the person themselves, to potential investors, and to partners they may want to work with. So my belief is, my hope is, that this kind of education that we're creating now, that we're prototyping now with Ubiquity in many countries around the world, is going to enable my children, is going to enable your children, and hopefully millions of people around the world ultimately to be able to make a living making a difference, because that's what the world needs now. Bring it on.